Mr. President.
Majority Whip.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today having just listened to the minority leader talk about a number of topics. What he didn't talk about is the fact that his party has shut down the Department of Homeland Security. There's a poll that's out by Gallup, and it says what's very important in terms of U.S. foreign policy goals, and the number one thing is to prevent future acts of international terrorism. Well, how do we prevent it? Who is it in this country that counters the terrorism? It's the Department of Homeland Security, which the Democrats, and they're going to have to vote again today, are likely, as they've announced, vote to keep it shut down. That is a betrayal of the American people. He used the word betrayal. To me, that's where it fits with what actions the Democrats are likely to take today. What's the number two very important purpose of U.S. foreign policy as a goal from a Gallup poll of the American people? Number two is preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction. So what do we hear the minority leader talk about? His opposition to the efforts to show peace through strength and undermine the ability of Iran to develop and use and deploy nuclear weapons. Once again, betrayal by the Democrats of the American people. Mr. President, today the Senate's going to vote on a bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security. This vital department needs to be funded immediately. The Democrats have been blocking it for weeks. Protecting the American people is not optional. It is the first duty of government. For 3 weeks, the Democrats have held hostage the Department of Homeland Security. You know the reason, Mr. President, is because the Democrats in this body and across the Capitol building in the House of Representatives prioritize illegal immigrant criminals over American citizens. And they have done it repeatedly through their votes and their actions. Democrats have shut down the Department of Homeland Security because they want to end enforcement of our immigration laws and end immigration enforcement in America. They've been very clear about that. They refuse to fund the Department of Homeland Security because they want to turn America into a sanctuary country. That's where they are. Those in this chamber would rather oppose President Trump than protect the American people. And they've repeatedly shown it. Let me say it again. Senate Democrats would rather oppose President Trump than protect the American people. This shutdown is a cheap publicity stunt for the radical left. They're doing it for the radical left. And it is at the same time a costly danger for our country and our citizens. Now that America has struck Iran, the number one threat to our homeland is the threat of terrorism. Last week in Austin, Texas, a lone wolf terrorist opened fire in a crowded establishment, killing 3 Americans and wounding over a dozen more. The shooter was wearing a T-shirt. The T-shirt bore an Iranian flag, and it was under a sweatshirt that said "Property of Allah." The warning lights are flashing red. Look, we know that Iran exports its terror abroad. They've been doing it for the last 10 years with the $56 billion that Barack Obama and the Democrats gave to the Ayatollah 10 years ago. For 4 years, Joe Biden and the Democrats opened the border. And we don't know who is in our country today. When Joe Biden was in office, 1,500 illegal immigrants from Iran were arrested at the southern border. You know what the Democrats then did? They released half of them into the United States. This was what was known as the Democrats' catch and release program. Who are they? Where are they? What are they doing today? No one knows. And these are just the people that we know about that were released in the country. Think about the thousands and thousands of gotaways during the time Joe Biden was president of the United States. They're in communities in all 50 states. Iran's tentacles stretch all the way to small communities in our nation. Now the Department of Homeland Security is warning. They are warning law enforcement nationwide about the elevated risk and threat from lone wolf attacks like we saw in Texas last weekend. And yet at this very moment today, Democrats in this chamber are continuing to block the funding for the very agency that is tasked with stopping these terrorist attacks. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, said funding for the Department of Homeland Security, his words, ridiculous. That's the way the Democrats perceive this. I'll tell you what's ridiculous. What's ridiculous is to shut down the agency responsible for fighting the terrorists in this country and stopping them before they act. That's what we're dealing with, Mr. President. It is ridiculous to refuse to pay the men and women who protect our homeland. That's what the Democrats are doing. It's ridiculous to cripple our cyber defense. That's what the Democrats are doing and continue to do. Mr. President, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, they protect our nation's critical infrastructure, including our energy infrastructure. Chuck Schumer is on the floor talking about energy. Why isn't he protecting our energy infrastructure in this country? Why is he continuing to make it vulnerable to attacks? Mr. President, it's awful what they're doing. Today, only 800 of over 2,000 employees are on the job in this department, and they're working without pay. The others have been furloughed due to the Democrat shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. And because of this shutdown, the agency has canceled both physical and cybersecurity assessments to detect vulnerabilities within our system. No wonder we're on high alert. We need to be on high alert because of the Democrats who have put us there. This is a direct threat to our nation's security. Shutting down the Department of Homeland Security, as Democrats in this chamber have done repeatedly, makes our country less safe, makes our citizens more vulnerable. But I expect to see what the Democrats come and once again continue to keep the Department of Homeland Security shut down. Mr. President, as you know, Republicans have tried to negotiate with the Democrats in good faith. The President has set offers to the Democrats to say, look, let's be reasonable here, open the Department of Homeland Security, but yet they refuse. They cling to their love of illegal immigrant criminals rather than to love of this nation and the safety and security of the people here. This is all about safety, national strength, national security. And the shutdown by the Democrats endangers each and every one of these, as well as each and every American citizen. The next cyber attack on our homeland, Democrats are going to bear full responsibility. The next lone wolf terrorist, Democrats will bear full responsibility. The next criminal who crosses the border illegally and kills an innocent American, fully on the Democrats. Blood will be on their hands because we don't have a functioning Department of Homeland Security that is funded with people on the ground in every position receiving their paychecks. The Democrats seem to think it's a bargaining chip. American safety and security is not a bargaining chip. And I'm going to vote with my Republican colleagues today to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security without delay. Thank you, Mr. President. And I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsop-Brooks.